Wow. Hey, much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Hope you guys are doing good. Thanks for taking the time to be here, listen to me once again. Appreciate you guys taking the time to do that, out of your day to be here. Appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and continue today a little bit. Try to get through this book. We're going to get into an interesting topic we've already gone over before. I know we've done a lot of the giant stuff, and in this book that we're going to be reading today, again, this book is the Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants in North America by Fritz Zimmerman, forward by L.A. Marzulli. We're going to go into a part of the book where they're actually going to talk about ancient dwarfs, people, like so-called pygmies, very small little people, and fairies, spiritual realms, all right? So, again, this is the book. All right, so we belly flop to this part of the book where we left off last time. And it says here the ancient dwarfs and fairies spiritual realms. Described as fanciful by archaeologists, this pipe may have been an artistic rendering of an ancient Ohio dwarf. The pipe was discovered on one of Ohio's largest burial mounds in Chillicothe, Ohio. According to religious texts, there are dark and foreboding shadows that have been cast across the lands of the mound builders of the Ohio Valley. This is the demonic world of ghosts and evil spirits that are perpetuated through the giant and dwarf races that once populated these regions. According to the Book of Enoch, both of these races had their origins with the fallen angels. It is written in the Book of Enoch of the giant and dwarf races. Evil spirits proceed from their bodies because they are created from above, and from the holy watchers is their beginning and their primal origin. There will be evil spirits on earth, and evil spirits they will be named. All right, so yeah, they talk about that, the offspring and creation of the so-called fallen or Nephilim, fallen angels. It wasn't just giants. You can include like fairies and pygmies and all these other cryptic creatures to that. Shout out to Anu for the origin stories that he has and all the indigenous stories that corroborate with it as well. The gaze upon the great necropolis of the many earthen tombs of the Ohio Valley is not to be confused with our present conceptualization of a graveyard. This is a land where the spirits still dwell. The mound builders believe in ancestral worship, where the dead placed in the burial mounds were not seen as individuals, but as part of a collective of spirits that could govern the future. Burial mounds were part of the religious canon of the mound builders and venerated places of worship, the mound itself acting as a conduit and portal that connected the living with the dead. The importance of this concept is that the spirits did not leave their earthly realm to ascend to a heaven, Valhalla, or happy hunting ground. All right, and then next page I have this image right here, and it says subterranean stone work in Wabash County, Indiana, where small entities believed to be fairies have been reported. All right, over there in Indiana. In regard to the many burial mounds that contain the remains of giant skeletons across North Americas and the British Isles, the Book of Enoch says, giants begotten by the flesh and spirits will be called evil spirits on earth, and the earth will be their dwelling place. This is spiritual elaboration of Genesis 6:4. There were giants in the earth of those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Analogous to the fallen angels and the giants are the writings about the fairies, nature spirits, and dwarf races, where there are striking similarities. The etymological root of the word fairies is fate, thus tying them with the giants as spiritual governors of the future. All right, fairies with fate, etymological root. You guys know that? It says they endeavored to entice them to visit their subterranean abodes in this drawing. According to Scottish legends, where many giant remains have been within have been found within the burial mounds, is the belief that access to the fairylands was access through the burial mounds. All right? Fairies, according to the book of Enoch, are fallen angels who were loyal to Lucifer. They were simultaneously cast out of heaven and sent to hell by God. However, God spared the fairies in mid descent and condemned them to live on the earth. The fairies that fell to earth would become dwarfs, ghosts, and evil spirits. Those who fell into the forest would become wood spirits and wild men. Bigfoot? And question mark, right? Are we talking about other types of Nephilim offspring? Those who fell into lakes and rivers would become water spirits. Like the giants, the legends of an ancient dwarf race abounds within the Native Americans who have a history as mound builders. This includes the Sioux and Cherokee tribes, all right? The Sioux Indians, who were part of the Hopewell Confederacy, Hopewell Mounds, right, believed that dwarves to have magical powers that are very similar to the Scottish legends. The Sioux believed that the dwarf race were true owners of any sun lodge that was constructed. They also believed that the sun dance ritual was observed, that by the dwarf and fairy spirits, and that they could determine the sincerity of the dancers and confer spiritual insight those they chose to be worthy. The sun dance is very reminiscent of the British stories of the fairies who could be seen dancing in a circle in the evenings. Listen, leaving a round imprint in the grass. Where are they getting these stories? Why is it all connecting like that, huh? Many of the henges and stone circles in Scotland have been identified as fairy rings. The henges in Scotland are identical to those in the Ohio Valley. Like the Sioux Sundance, the henges were constructed to venerate solar events of the equinox, solstices, and the May 1st and October 31st sunrise and sunset. It was believed that entering a fairy ring on the evening of May 1st or October 31st, listen, October 31st, Halloween, was one of the New Year's for the Celts, ancient Druids, was especially dangerous. It's a Scottish legend that if you walk around the stone circle, commonly known as the fairy ring, 3 times and make a wish, it will come true. All right? Is this myth or history? In this drawing, they have Henge north of the main group at Mound State Park in Anderson, Indiana, that is aligned to the May 1st sunrise and the October 31st sunset, all right? Just like in ancient Scotland. All right, guys? Fairies wearing blue robes have been sighted numerous times near this henge, all right? Fairies wearing blue robes. The Newark, Ohio henge shares this same alignment, all right? Another similarity between the ancient Scots and the Sioux is the is the belief that fairies resided in the mounds. Lewis and Clark reported that while in South Dakota with the Sioux peoples, they traveled to the junction of the Vermilion and Missouri rivers to see the mountain of the little people. Lewis wrote in his journal that the little people were devils and that the Omaha and Otto Sioux would not go near that place. All right, did you guys know that Lewis and Clark and that they wrote, like Lewis actually wrote that in his journal? They don't really tell people a lot of this stuff. The book of Enoch and the Bible tie the giant and dwarf races in the Ohio Valley and the British Isles with the fallen angels. These spiritual manifestations are inexorably linked to the burial mounds and circles and these regions. These legends survive today with the Sioux, who have been documented as being in the Ohio Valley contemporaneously with the construction of the mounds and earthworks. The following is a report of a mass grave of a pygmy or dwarf race that was discovered in Coshocton County, Ohio. In the same county, not far distant, was the discovery of giant human remains. All right, remember, they find giants all over here too. Also reported in the county is a circular work that was connected by a path of red stones to a venerated spring. Springs were associated with the underworld and can easily attach to the pantheon of the fairies and their habitation underground. In this picture, it says large burial mound located south of Coshocton, Ohio. On the ridge in the background was the site of the pygmy graves. It is by chance that they were buried overlooking this portal of the fairylands. All right. Centennial History of Cochocton, County, Ohio, 1909. All right, so now these are historical reports that we're going to go over. This is from the, again, Centennial History of Cochocton County from 1909. It says the missionary Seisberger noted 133 years ago the numerous signs of an ancient race here. He referred particularly to the cemetery containing thousands of graves near the mound 3 miles south of Cochocton. All right. The skeletons reduced to chalky ashes were 3 to 4.5 feet long. All right, 3 feet or four, right? Smaller than the Indian or mound skeletons. These pygmies have led much conjecture. Thus far, no definite conclusion is recorded in any of the notices of this ancient city of the dead. Skulls were described as triangular in shape, much flattened at the sides and back, though not with the slant brow or of the flathead Indians seen in the West. A hole pierced the back of the head. The bones were displayed, the skull being found with the pelvis, from which it is inferred that the body was dismembered before burial. The long rows of graves of the pygmy race of Cochocton were regularly arranged with heads to the west, a circumstance which has given rise to the theory that these people were sun worshippers, facing the daily approach of the sun god over the eastern hills. Dodge to hijack, this is their theories, but maybe it's connected some way to the movements of the sun. In this respect, however, there is no resemblance to the various positions of the skeletons found in our mounds. The iron nails mentioned by Hildreth as found in this ancient cemetery take on added interest in view of the discovery in a mound near Cincinnati, reported by F. W. Putnam, curator of the Peabody Museum. Masses of meteoric iron were found on an altar with bars of iron and other objects made of metal. All right. So thousands of graves here, right, in Cochocton, Ohio, of pygmies. And remember, guys, we've gone over information, I think, in Tennessee and Kentucky, like thousands of graves over there. So many. I think if we're not 7,000 or 700,000, something like that. It was a big number. All right. If I can't remember correctly, but it was so many that they found over there. And now they're finding this here in Ohio, as far as you guys can see. We're going to keep reading reports. It says here that thousands of graves points only to the conclusion that the country around was the seat of a large population. It is possible that in a land where the dead were worshipped and portals constructed for their egress, that other spiritual doors were opened. And is this why Ohio has more paranormal activity than anywhere else in North America? The connections between the dwarf and giant races in the Book of Enoch, Scottish legends, and Native American lore cannot be dismissed. All right, that's what you've been trying to say. This is the true old world. It cannot be dismissed. In my travels to over 700 mound and earthwork sites, I have personally witnessed a disembodied voice at mound site and seeing shadow people at several of the hilltop earthworks in Ohio. Turns out that the Scottish legends say that the hilltop earthen works were a favorite place of the fairies. According to the Jewish Talmud, should you see a giant or fairy spirit, repeat, "Blessed be God who alters man." Talmud, huh? Chazars, huh? Pennsylvania. All right, it says here in Pennsylvania, we got a report from the Charlotte Democrat, Charlotte, North Carolina, May 21st, 1896. This is the time this report was written in that journal or newspaper. Says Race of Ancient Pygmies is the title. Remarkable discovery of more than 20 skeletons. Waynesboro, Pennsylvania, May 14th. John Lappin plowed up a lot of bones on his farm 3 miles southeast of here last year and again this spring. The skeletons were the size of a child. L.W. Cyrus, a shoe merchant, advanced the theory that the grave was not that of a child but contained the remains of one of a race of pygmies. He succeeded in arousing the interest of Professor Waycroft of Waynesburg College, W. L. Allison, Edward Stout, Norval Sook, Hayes Reinhardt, Thomas Finch, and photographer B. C. Cyrus. In company with those gentlemen, Mr. Cyrus opened 20 graves on a knoll in front of Mr. Lapin's house. The graves were arranged in the segment of a circle, nearly 400 feet in diameter. They were elliptical, holes dug in the earth and covered by smooth slabs of sandstone. The cavities under the slabs were 9 or 10 inches deep. The slabs were found uniformly 10 inches below the surface. The skeletons had been placed in the graves unprotected by masonry. The head had been bent forward over the breast. The limbs had been drawn up. The body had evidently been placed partly on the right side, and in every instance, the face had been turned to the east. The average length of the skeletons was 18 inches. That's how tall they were. Length of the head, 6 inches. Spinal column, 9 inches. Forearm, 3 to 4 inches. In one of the graves was found a volume bound in a deer skin on which was written the following: John T. Kent, born 1749, the 17th day of October, 1796. I, John Kent, while digging a hole in the new clearing for the purpose of planting an apple tree, uncovered a human skeleton about 3 feet long. Believing in the final resurrection of the body, as well as the sun, I carefully replaced the stone over the grave and planted the tree at the head of the grave. Rest in peace, ye mankind of ancient days, ye former guardian of the forest land, thy bones shall be removed. Continues, says here, West Virginia. Chronicles of Border Warfare in West Virginia, 1895. That's the name of that report or book. It says, in this state too have been found burying grounds in which the skeletons seemed all to have been those of pygmies. The graves in which the bodies had been deposited were seldom 3 feet in length. All right, 3 feet in length. Yet the teeth and the skulls proved that they were the bodies of persons of mature age. That's how they know these ain't children, okay? Upon the whole, there cannot be much doubt that America was once inhabited by a people not otherwise allied to the Indians of the present day, than that they were descendants of him from whom has sprung the whole human family. People with 3 feet, 3 feet long, huh? In West Virginia. It also says here, History of Fayette County, West Virginia, 1926. That's the name of the book. It says, within the village of Brownstown, 10 miles above Charlestown, and just below the mouth of Lens Creek, is another such burying ground. Some time ago, two skeletons were found together here, one of a huge frame about 7 feet in length, and the other that of a deformed dwarf about 4 feet in length. Okay? Two different skeletons, a giant and a dwarf. Illinois. Going over to Illinois, says St. Louis Republic, November 29th, 1903. Skeleton of a giant. Harrisburg, Illinois. While digging a well on the old Inman factory lot near Shawneetown a few days ago, Sanford K. Jenkins unearthed several skeletons and old Indian relics. In a space 8 feet square, Jenkins took out 14 skeletons and 6 vessels of different sizes. One peculiar and remarkable thing about the skeletons were the size. One skeleton was that of a giant, which measured fully 8 feet in height. All right, we got giant again, 8-foot giant, while right near this one was found the skull of an adult not larger than that of a 4-year-old child. All right, by like a 3-footer, and was perhaps the remains of a pygmy. While the ground is near the old Indian mound and is supposed to have been the burying grounds of the Indians in early days, it is thought by some of the older citizens that they were buried over 1,000 years ago, before Indians inhabited this country, before those Indians, right? All right, we continue. We go over to Tennessee. You see all these reports, guys, right? And I think we're probably gonna get this. We've probably got the story. We're gonna get it like it's the first time from another source. This is a very interesting one. Let's see if it's the same one. It says Tennessee, Natural and Aboriginal History of Tennessee. Okay, 1823. I think we have read that book, anthropological book, very good scholarly book actually. And it says I could devote an entire section to the consideration of the ancient pygmies. The following is a synopsis of the facts stated by him in the reference to this matter. A number of small skeletons were discovered a few miles from Sparta, Tennessee. in White County, an account of which was given by Mr. Lane. The graves were about 2 feet in length, 14 inches broad, and 16 inches deep. These extend promiscuously throughout the farm of Mr. Lane and in a large and closely connected burying ground in the vicinity. There were others of the same description 4 miles south of Sparta, and it is said that hundreds of them might be found throughout the locality. There is no discernible rising on the surface of the earth on account of these graves, and they were found by sinking an iron rod into the ground until it struck the covering stone of the coffins. These graves generally contain small skeletons of human beings, so much decayed that they could not be removed without being broken to pieces or crumbling to dust. There were also found in these remnants of pottery and shells, as well as bones of animals, and one the skeleton lay on its back with its feet drawn up so as to raise the knees about 4 inches above the bottom of the grave. The head was also raised as to cause the chin to lie upon the breast. This skeleton, carefully measured as it lay, was found to be from a little below the ankle joints to the top of the skull, 2 feet 10 inches, making a proper allowance for the bending of the legs and the inclination of the head. But one grave of the whole series was of a larger size and of a different form, being constructed after the manner of a coffin, 14 inches broad at the head, 22 at the elbow, and 10 at the foot. The sides and ends were of flagstone, the same as those of the small graves. In this grave lay a skeleton 5 foot 5 inches long, the head to the west and the feet to the east. The skeleton was carefully uncovered without displacing any of the bones until the whole was exposed to view. Its mouth was wide open and contained a full set of teeth. The arms lay along the side, the ribs were broad and flat, and more than double the size of those of the pygmies. The head was also larger, the eyes wider apart, and the forehead higher than those in the smaller graves. The skull was perfect with the exception of a fracture on the right cheekbone, and a quantity of fine, straight hair adhered to it, which was of bright gray color. No vessels or trinkets were found with this skeleton, and from the great dissimilarity in the shape of its head and the size and form of the bones, it seemed to belong to a different tribe from the skeletons of the smaller graves. From the great number of small graves found here, says Mr. Lane, all of the same description, and among them all but one being of a large size, it seemed to indicate that there was in ancient times a race of people whose height was from 2 feet 10 to 3 feet. All right, a 2 foot 10 inch person to 3 feet tall. Come on, guys. Pygmies here in Tennessee, as old as the hair of the large skeleton seemed to be, there was not a tooth lost or unsound in the either jaw. But one of the pygmy heads had in the upper jaw a decayed tooth, whence it was conjectured that the person to whom this skeleton belonged was older than the former. Specimens of the contents of these graves were submitted to the medical gentlemen of Nashville, and various opinions were entertained as to the maturity or infancy of the smaller skeletons. The prevailing one seemed to be that these skeletons belonged to adult persons of small size, and also that some of the bones found were those of animals, natural, and aboriginal history of Tennessee. All right, that was a very scholarly book and report they did with, that's just what they wrote. They found, and they tell you the number of graves. It was numerous, thousands. And continuing, it says here, Anthropological Institute Journal 6 from 1876. An ancient graveyard of vast proportions has been found in Coffee County. It is similar to those found in White County and other places in Middle Tennessee, but is vastly more extensive and shows that the race of pygmies who once inhabited this country were very numerous, okay? Very numerous race of pygmies, ancient America, guys. The same peculiarities of position observed in the White County graves are found in these. The writer of the letter says, some considerable excitement and curiosity took place a few days since near Hillsborough, Coffee County, on James Brown's farm. A man was plowing in a field which had been cultivated many years and plowed up a man's skull and other bones. After making further examination, they found that there were about 6 acres in the graveyard. Wow. They were buried in sitting or standing position. Listen to this. How many? I see. I wasn't kidding. The bones show that they were a tribe of people. All right. The bones show they were what? A dwarf tribe of people about 3 feet high. It is estimated that there were about 75,000 to 100,000 buried there. I told you I wasn't kidding. The numbers were large. I told you. They found this in Tennessee, guys, Coffee County. 75,000 to 100,000 at least buried there. Pygmies, people, small people, a race of pygmies, dwarf tribe of people. This shows that this country was inhabited hundreds of years ago. Okay? And we've read a full report from the Aboriginal History of Tennessee and other reports on this. I got a whole video on that. All right? Make sure you catch up to all previous presentations. It says here, continuing, Queens County Sentinel. That's the journal or newspaper, August 3rd, 1893. And it says here, dwarf Americans. In eastern Tennessee have been found graves and skeletons of an almost forgotten people. The Smithsonian Institution has undertaken a peculiar work in this locality. You see what happened? So, they got involved and we don't know anything about this history because the Smithsonian, they just, we know they be just hiding stuff. They're the gatekeepers, they're the scapegoats, they work for other people, but, they are very famous for, gatekeeping true archaeological finds, history in America, hiding it and writing it off. So now we know why we never heard of these graves, because they were undertaking a lot of work there, the Smithsonian. This people of the world now have paid lengthy visits to that hilly country known as East Tennessee, have always been impressed with the sublimity and beauty of the mountains, the simplicity and superstition of the inhabitants, and the general air of sleepy mysteriousness surrounding everything. Ask one of these people where they would most expect to find a race of dwarfs or giants, and the reply will be in East Tennessee. And recent developments seem to bear them out. For the last few years, the remains of people less than 3 feet in height have been discovered in this country. That's the Queens County Sentinel, 1893. On the eastern slope of one of the peaks of the Great Smoky Mountains, where the first rays of the morning sun strike, is an ancient burying ground. And such another burying place could not be found, though the world would be searched, for not one grave is more than 3 feet long. The tombs are 3 feet below the surface and are formed of cement and flat stones, and have defied the ravages of time to cause them to be destroyed. Most of those examined contain a vase, a few beads, and human skeletons, which was never more than 36 inches long, all right, 33 feet, and was that of a full-grown person. These weren't children. They can tell these were adult people, 3 feet long, guys. This is what they're finding here. Listen, different locations, not just one site. The natives have a beautiful legend of the place and say none were interred here except for children, while naturalists claim the skulls to have reached their full growth. All right, the scientists say no, these are adults. But the most interesting account is that of the red men who held that country when first settled by Europeans. They claim that when they came to that section of the country, it was peopled by a race of small, fierce men with red hair. Listen, that these dwarfs waged a long and bloody war with the Indians, but were finally all killed. That this burying ground was used long before they came into the country. All right, that's what they were burying the people, the little dwarfs. All right, we continue. It says here, Missouri. All right, it says the Cook County Herald, October 24th, 1903. Prehistoric cemetery. Workman Terracing King Hill, an old landmark of the northwestern Missouri, which is to be converted into a residential suburb of St. Joseph, have unearthed a prehistoric cemetery, right? So they built a what? A residential suburb on top of a what? A prehistoric cemetery, right? The remains of a race of dwarves, not allied with any tribe known to have inhabited this territory. and unaccounted for by Indian legendary repose on the summit of King Hill, a feature remarkable in itself and especially marked in connection with the dwarfish remnants of a prehistoric man found on the summit is the discovery of human bones, evidently those of a giant, probably more than 7 feet tall and big boned, all right? And he's big boned, he or she. Low flat heads with small intelligence and marked animal propensities characterize these people. Heavy jaws and strong, well preserved teeth carried the records of their lives forward. Brutes, human but inhumane, self reliant, they are savages of a lower order than are known today. All right, Dutch the Haja. This is how they're describing the bones. All right, yet they honor their dead. Shells such as are found on the banks of many inland streams, plentiful on the sandbars of the Missouri, overlooked by King Hill, and the stones of unusual hues, worthless in the commercial marts of today. The playthings of children were deposited in the graves. All right. So we got pygmies there too and giants. All right. And now we go, it says here, South Dakota. The Los Angeles Times, August 4th, 1907, says find prehistoric graveyard. Railroad graders cut into burying ground of ancient pygmy race. Giants of 8 feet discovered. Again, pygmies and giants all near each other, right? And it says here, Okakoma, South Dakota. So this is in South Dakota. August 3rd, exclusive dispatch. A remarkable prehistoric burying ground has been cut into by the railroad graders east of Oakoma, and the remains of what appeared to be a pygmy race have been discovered. The old burying ground is now a great deposit of gravel, and it is in this that the bodies are found. All right, and gravel, that must be old. In the neighborhood of 50 skeletons have so far been unearthed. These are all of a race of dwarves about 4 feet tall. All right, you guys hear that? None of them are taller than 4 feet. And the physicians have pronounced them the remains of adults, not children. All right, the scientists said, yeah, these are adults. The burial tool placed the bodies standing or sitting, not lying down. One of the skeletons is that of a giant. All right, they even found a giant more than what? 8 feet high. Wow, so imagine 8 footers and 4 footers living at the same place. Of course, those were really giants to those 4 footers, right? The University of South Dakota is expected to send an archaeologist to investigate the find. Continuing in South Dakota says, in the South Dakota country, 1922. While on their journey up the Missouri, Captain Lewis and Clark with 10 men stopped in what is now Clay County, South Dakota, to visit a mound in the midst of the flat prairie. This mound was about 900 feet long, more than 180 feet wide, and 70 feet high, with a top as smooth and level as the plain from which the mound rose. The Indians called this the Mountain of the Little People, or Little Spirits. The Lewis and Clark Journal says the Indians believe that it is the abode of evil spirits in the human form, about 18 inches high. All right, 18 inches high. That's under 2 feet, guys. With remark by ably large heads. They are armed with sharp arrows, with which they are very skillful, and are always on the watch to kill those who have the hardihood to approach their residence. The tradition is that many have suffered from these little evil spirits, and among others, three Omaha Indians fell a sacrifice to them a few years since. This has inspired all the neighboring nations with such terror that no consideration could tempt them to visit the hill. We saw none of these wicked little spirits nor any place for them, except some small holes scattered over the top. All right. And we move on. It says here, Idaho. Now there's more in Idaho too. The Spokesman Review. That's the name of the journal or newspaper. Says June 5th, 1902 is when this was written. And the title is Ancient Pygmy Race Discovered in Idaho. 25 miles up Big Willow from Payette is a more curious deposit of little skeletons resembling that of the human being, says a correspondent of the Boise Statesman. The teeth are the same. The backbone is the same. The relics are abundant, but to find intact is difficult. The teeth and section of the backbone are numerous. They exist just about the ancient waterline and are found near extensive deposits of salmon bones petrified. Series of petrifications have taken place, reducing plant and animal life to stone and painting vegetation pictures on the rocks. The district is rugged and unfrequented. The little people who were wiped from the face of the earth were not larger than monkeys, and their last resting place will be found interesting for curio gatherers or the scientists, all right? The little people in ancient America. Continuing, it says here, New Mexico, all right? And we have talked about this, I believe, archaeological find. It says here, The Colonists, volume, is that uh, 54, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Roman numerals. This is October 21st, 1912. That's 18-inch mummy. An 18-inch mummy, huh? An ancient mummy, 18 inches high, in a good state of preservation, has been found at the cliff dwellings on the Upper Gila near Silver City, New Mexico. An instruction had been received to forward it to the Smithsonian Institution at Washington. Careful examination confirms the idea of many scientists that the old cliffmen were of a dwarf race, okay? The most striking features of their dwellings were very small doorways and extremely low ceilings, okay? The cliff dwellers, they were dwarves, huh? Ruins yield mummies of pygmies and giants, all right? So not all of them we know, but hey, maybe a lot of them were pygmies. So it says here in the Spokane Daily Chronicle from January 9th, 1936, these crumbling ruins of a long perished city, where mummified human forms revealed that 7-foot giants, right, and 3-foot pygmies, again together, apparently lived together, were found by Paxton C. Hayes, ethnologist, who has spent the last 7 years exploring the upland wastes of northern Mexico. The architecture is of a type never before discovered, resembling that of cliff dwellings but with distinct Mongolian features. The strange civilization is believed to antedate that of the Mayans. Antedate, older than the Mayans, how they're saying, but they're definitely not Mongolian. That's a created word in the 1900s. Dodge the hijack. Seeing it in reverse. Hayes plans an expedition for a thorough search of the huge caves in Sonora, 400 miles from Hermosillo City. Continuing, we have more. It says here in Arizona, Coconino Sun, Flagstaff, Arizona, December 31st, 1915. There's probably an ancient cowboy. Hans Augustus and James Hansen and Leo Ellsworth returned Monday from White River, where they have been the past 6 weeks hauling wood for the Indian Agency. They report the finding of a skeleton of a horned man. A horned man, huh? A skeleton? A man with horns? Come on, guys. The skeleton was 3 feet tall and he was a little guy. Wow, with well defined horns about 2 inches long near the temples. The skeleton was found near the east fork of the White River, close to a large cave. It was fully developed man and was on exhibition at Whitewater several days before being sent to a museum in Washington City. All right, the Snowflake Herald. So that's when they got stolen or hidden, right? That was reported in the Coconino Sun, all right, 1915. Continuing, it says the Border City Star from March 20, 1923. Says cliff dweller skeleton declared that of pygmy. Appears no larger than bones of a child, yet has perfectly developed teeth. Skull shows no evidence of immaturity, all right? So basically, it's an adult, what they're trying to tell you. Continues, says Prescott, Arizona, March 20th. Scientists who will visit Prescott next summer to attempt to fathom the mystery of the ancient cliff dwelling on the Verde River will be asked to give their attention to a skeleton found recently by Morris and Howell Pain. Ranchers living a few miles north of this city. Although the skeleton is apparently no larger than that of a child of 4 or 5 years, the skull contains a fully developed set of mature teeth. All right, so an adult then. The Payne brothers unearthed the skeletons while excavating. Tiny doorways and low ceilings seem to bear out the theory that the people living there were of small stature, but the dwarf like skeleton is so much smaller than that of the man of today that it has created another of those archaeological problems, which is the purpose of the National Geographic Society to solve, okay, or hide, huh? It is possible in a series of expeditions next summer for a road in Granite Dells, a vast granite formation near Prescott. Digging carefully, they were able to extricate practically all of the bones without breaking them. The skeleton has excited a lively interest on account of the size and the maturity of the teeth and the skull bones, which one physician said showed none of the evidences of immaturity of an infant's cranium. All right, so as an adult, and again, they got these bones, they were able to preserve them. What happened to this stuff? Where is all this stuff they hid from us? Prints of the hands of the builders of the well-preserved prehistoric dwelling known as Moctezuma's Castle are still seen in the mud like mortar, holding the stones together, and these prints indicate that the dwellers were persons with very small hands. The tiny doorways and low ceilings seem to bear out the theory that the people living there were of small stature, but the dwarf-like skeleton is so much smaller than that of the man of today that it creates another of those archaeological problems, which is the purpose of, again, the National Geographic Society to solve. All right, it is possible in a series of expeditions next summer. They tend to repeat things in this book, you know. So real quick, this is what they were talking about, Moctezuma's Castle. This is the place they're saying they have very small ceilings, doorways. This is what they found in the skeletons of the pygmies, all right? Moctezuma Castle in Arizona. This is what they're hiding from us, guys. And it kind of makes sense that some of these dwellings were of little people, maybe, especially if they're like small like that, little doorways and everything. All right. Just wanted to show you guys what they were talking about.